first developed this talk because a colleague of mine, Jessica Purcell at Monash, a topology person, said that she would like me to give a talk at Monash just after I left, which was in September, just to fill people in about what goes on behind the scenes. It's a bit of a mystery to people. You submit the grant and then what happens? What's actually going on in Canberra when things are discussed? What's important? So that was her question. What goes on behind the scenes for determining which grants are funded? What's the process after we submit the grant? Who reviews it? How's it decided? What happens when your reviews are returned, your rejoinders? Does the panel get together for 3 long days like in the NSF in the US, which was her experience because she came from the US? And what aspects of the proposal get talked about the most in the room? What are people really talking about? And her related question was, what advice do you have for people about how their proposals could become more compelling? And without going into any specifics of people and proposals, could I share some of the things that I've seen where things go wrong and where somebody has really hurt their case a lot through an error that could have been avoided? So that's what this talk is really about. There's a bunch of slides here that I didn't write. They look a bit like that. They're official ARC slides, and I've put them in there just for the sake of completeness and so that you get a complete picture of the whole process. And so this is the National Competitive Grant Process life cycle, which I don't really want to dwell on, but basically funding rules are released, you write your proposal, it's assessed, there's a selection meeting in Canberra. Yes, it's a 3-day meeting in Canberra, or 3 or 4 days. And then finally, several months after we recommend grants, literally 3 months later, the Minister finally approves it, and then the results get released. And I have no idea why it takes 3 months at that point, but that's what it is. Okay, so that's the official ARC slide. This is another official ARC slide about how proposals are assessed, an overview. So it is a peer review process. As you know, your proposal is reviewed by colleagues in Australia and overseas, and it's designed to be fair, thorough and transparent. And I do believe it is. I do believe that the transparency of the process and fairness is something that the ARC works very hard to ensure, and I was quite impressed with that. So all proposals are assessed against the published selection criteria and with the weightings of those. Now, so you need to know that proposals get assigned to 2 different types of assessors. There are 2 what are called general assessors, and they are people like me who sit on the College of Experts. And then at least 2 detailed assessors who are people who have much more specific knowledge in the field, who are chosen by the general assessors. So just to give you an idea, in the room in Canberra, when we're talking about all the maths and stats proposals, we also are talking about chemistry and physics and earth sciences at the same time. And around the room, there might be 20 people, and about 4 of them are knowledgeable about maths and stats. Okay, so your proposal is going to be assigned to 2 of those people. Not at random. It's meant to be aligned with best match. And the ARC are the people who make that allocation of which 2 college members will be allocated to your proposal. At that point, the ARC don't make any decisions. They just allocate 2 college members to look after each proposal. One is called Carriage 1 and one is called Carriage 2, very creatively. And Carriage 1 is the one that really makes all the decisions. Carriage 1 is the person who assigns up to 8 detailed assessors. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the ARC staff are in the background assessing eligibility to see whether or not you meet the rules of whether you're allowed to have that many grants, etc. But they don't decide which proposals should be funded. Okay, so next question, who reviews that and how is that decided? So Carriage 1, so I was Carriage 1 last year for about 40 DPs and about 15 or 18 DECRAs. And I was Carriage 2 for that many again. So I had to read, well over 100 proposals, and I had 3 months to read them all, okay? But half of them I had to read incredibly seriously because I was responsible for making decisions about those. The other one I was supporting somebody else making decisions. So one of your first jobs as Carriage 1, once the proposals are all submitted and the ARC has assigned you your Carriage 1 and your Carriage 2 proposals, one of the first jobs, and you have a week to do it, is to assign 8 assessors for every proposal. And the way that the ARC web system, the RMS, tries to help you to do this task in a short period of time is to create this word cloud thing. So the word cloud takes words that are generated from the proposal summary, the proposal title, the 100-word summary, FOR codes, SEO codes, and it generates, for every proposal, you've got a word cloud like that. And then the ARC technology behind the scenes has attempted to match the word cloud for the proposal to the word cloud of every assessor in the database. Now, a word cloud for an assessor in the database is generated by the grants that the ARC knows that assessor holds, plus what they have personally typed in as their research interests. And it's kind of a little frustrating how little information a lot of people have typed in about their research interests, or they'll just type in some codes, 01, 02, 02, as a research interest. That's an incredibly broad, I mean, what is that? Mathematical biology? Some part of applied maths, but it doesn't really tell us very much. And so you end up thinking, I don't know if that's really a good match or not. Just because we have 01, 02, 02 in common with somebody doesn't mean I feel comfortable assigning the proposal to that person without knowing more about which kind of mathematical techniques they're using or things. So I've got to say that this word cloud thing I personally didn't find very helpful. So what it does, I'm looking at a proposal, I have to assign 8 people. It recommends a whole long list of people, puts them in rank order based on similarity match. The problem is that I look at the top 5, 6, 7, 8 people and I think, they don't work in this area. So what's gone wrong? You know, I start with proposals where I actually understand myself. I'm Carriage 1 and it's my field and I know the people, and when I look at the top people being recommended by RMS and I don't have confidence in that, I worry. And then I start to drill down about why did it recommend that person, and I start searching for people I know who work in that field who I don't think have any conflict of interest, who should be in the system and available, and why are they not in the top 8 or 20 people. So, we've given feedback to the ARC that this word cloud needs to be improved. But I mention it to you because you need to know that if I was very lazy, which I'm not, but if I was very lazy and I was trying to do this very quickly, I would just take the top 8 recommendations and it would not necessarily be the best set of assessors. I don't think any of my colleagues around the table were lazy either, and we all talked about the need to improve this system. But what worries me is that in fields where I understand the field, I had to work really hard to manually search for people who I know would be really great assessors. I worry in some of the proposals that I got asked to be Carriage 1 for that are slightly outside my area of expertise, I didn't have that same ability to do that. I spent a lot of time on Google searching for people and then seeing if they were in the database and all that kind of stuff. If you're cramped for time and you just want to rely on the word cloud, maybe we get assessors who are not as perfect as can be. So please bear that in mind when you're choosing your words, when you're choosing the words you use in your title. Please don't say very vague generic things like mathematical modelling. While it's useful to have big picture words describing what you're doing, be aware that if I'm looking at a proposal and then someone is claiming to be doing mathematical modelling of some system, I need to know a little bit more information about, well, what kind of mathematical modelling? Are we talking about reaction diffusion equations? Are we talking about stochastic processes? What are we talking about in the whole field of mathematics? Where are you placing yourself? And in order to find that information, if you don't give it in the title, the summary, or with the FOR codes or whatever, then I have to open up the PDF at that point. I have to scroll through many, many pages to try to find the actual 8 or 10 page project description. I have to start scanning my eyes just to see positioning, what kind of mathematician or statistician are you? What are the techniques you're using? Therefore, which assessor is going to understand the detail? That slows me down a lot. And so I know sometimes research officers give you advice about don't get too technical, and they want you to be vague. I'm just sharing my perspective with you. If you're too vague, it doesn't help. You might get assessors that are just vague, just general mathematicians rather than someone who actually knows what you're doing. Okay.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes. Yeah, please interrupt as we go.
This one is, how long have they been doing the word cloud?
It was new last year.
Okay,
I think.
So they just like put that out.
Yeah,
and
they're keen for feedback, and we gave them feedback.
Before that, was there anything to help?
I don't know because I wasn't involved before that, but I think they're pretty excited about it as a kind of intelligence that's supporting.
The thing is that before that there wasn't a lot, so you just had to do what you've done.
Yeah.
Anyway, which was.
Yeah.
Wasn't there like keywords or something that was matched?
Yeah.
And the other question that I had was.
It'll come. Okay, so.
Did you use your expert statement in your word cloud, or
Sorry?
did you use the expert statement in the word cloud?
What's the expert statement?
I think that's new in this round.
Oh, is it? I haven't read the guidelines for the next round yet. I'm not applying.
But it is, last year you can have sort of, not in your proposal, but you also have as an AOC assessor, you write sort of
Yeah.
what you do, but is that also being used when finding assessors?
Yes, that's right. So this one is I'm just talking about how it generates the word cloud for a proposal, but of course it also generates word clouds for every assessor, and that's based on their proposals that are in the system, plus what you write in how you describe yourself as an expert. And most people have just been kind of lazy in how they've described that, and they'll just say 0102. And there's not enough detail in those descriptions of you as an assessor.
I remember my question. Are you, is everybody directed not to look particularly at the applications when you assign reviewers, or is it
No,
also...
you're allowed to open up the proposals at that point. It just really slows you down. And and you've got a week to assign, and you're in a hurry to just assign assessors because you've got to get the invitations out, and to have to open up every proposal and look for it when maybe, I don't know if it's realistic, but maybe I should have been able to tell from just the summary information whether you were a stochastic processes person or a reaction diffusion equation person or a dynamical systems person. Maybe I should have been able to tell that. I don't know. But I also accept what people say about don't make it too technical. But I'm just giving you my feedback that sometimes a little bit of technical information helps position it better. Okay, I need to talk about conflict of interest. So assessors have conflict of interest. Your proposal is not sent to any assessor who the ARC believes has a conflict of interest with you. Conflicts of interest are institutional, professional and personal. So I had conflicts of interest, and so it's not just for assessors, it's for college members as well. I had conflicts of interest with anyone from Monash, anyone from Melbourne, anyone to do with ACEMS. The ARC didn't realise this at first, so they assigned me a whole bunch of proposals from ACEMS people and from Melbourne people because they didn't know that I was in the process of moving to Melbourne. And then when that all went through their offices to approve me joining ACEMS and to approve me transferring my laureate to Melbourne, then alarms went off. It's like, oh, she has a conflict with a whole bunch of people we didn't realise, so they took them away from me. I'd already read them, but I hadn't ranked them, I hadn't scored them. So it was really interesting to see proposals, but I had a conflict of interest and was not able to upload any scores. And in Canberra, when those proposals were being discussed, I was out of the room, had no knowledge of what happened. So yeah, if you didn't get your grant, not my fault. But also I did read some proposals, not all proposals. So happy to provide some feedback later if it happens to be one that I saw. Okay, so there's a bunch of conflicts, and the ARC takes it extremely seriously. It's almost like a cone of silence that goes on, and you're not allowed at dinner that night, you're not allowed to be still discussing proposals and everything like that. So I was very impressed with how seriously they take that and the integrity of the process. Okay, so RMS uses a great amount of information that it has. It definitely knows about any institutional conflicts you have, but it doesn't know about who your past relationships have been with and all sorts of stuff like that, right? So occasionally there might be something that slips through where someone's allocated a proposal. Now they should be declining it, right? When assessors are invited to assess proposals, they can reject and give a reason. You'd like to think that assessors would be doing that if they had a conflict. If something still slips through and you feel that when you read the assessor reports, you feel that somebody you know who they are based on what they said, and you feel that there is a conflict of interest here, judging by how they talked about you or your work, you should mention it in the rejoinder. Just alert the college members to the fact that there could be a conflict of interest with this assessor and let them investigate. Okay, I wanted to show you this, also an official ARC slide. For those of you who have assessed proposals before, so this is for DP, you will know this. This is the advice for how you should score proposals. So a score of A on any of the criteria, whether it's track record or the research proposal, should only be given to around 10% of proposals. Now, if you're only assessing 2 or 3 proposals, then this is a bit meaningless, right? But for someone like me that's assessing over 100, then this is a distribution that I'm supposed to try to observe. So only about 10% of them should be given a ranking of A, which means that we're definitely going to fund it, assuming next year the budget stretches to 10%. It's usually about, what is it, 19%? I can't remember what it was last year. B should only be given to around 15% of proposals. So that's your top 25 right there. And so these ones are not going to get funded. Very good. They're interesting, it's sound and compelling. And so you might read assessors' reports where people are describing your work as compelling and sound methodology, really interesting work, but they're giving it a C. Right? They're using those words because they've been told to use those words. They're looking at this guideline, they're thinking, oh, project description, A, B, C, D. Oh, look, it was sound and compelling, I'll give it a C. And the number of times I've had people come, when I was head of school, people come and knock on my door and say, I think I'm going to get my grant because they describe my work as really sound and compelling. And I think, oh, I feel, I hate to break it to you, but have a look at what the words that they're told to use. Did they describe it as truly outstanding? Or did they say it was solid? You know, solid is kind of like the kiss of death. So just bear that in mind. It's not enough to be interesting, sound and compelling. There are so many great grants. You know, we wish there was enough money for so many more, but unless it's being described as outstanding or excellent, it's not going to get up there. And, you know, of the 100 proposals that I was reading, and I was lying on the couch for days and, you know, a couple of days a week for months doing this, and occasionally I would yell out to my husband in the other room, I found a D. I found a proposal that I actually think deserves a D. And it was so rare because most of them were great. You know, B's or C's, frequently A's, and I thought, I'm giving too many A's, I know they're going to prune that back to be 10% only, but occasionally I would find a D because there was actually something wrong with it, and I was so excited, and it was such a rare event. So, you know, the standard of what goes on is great, and it's really hard to force 35% of proposals to be labelled as good. And of course the bottom 20% uncompetitive, fatal flaws. I didn't see 20% that had fatal flaws, but anyway. Okay, and so for someone like me that's assessing lots of proposals, it actually doesn't matter how I score them. The ARC standardises them anyway to fit this distribution, right? So the ranking becomes important.
So you have to rank multiples?
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes, and so I'm giving scores of A to E for the 4 criteria, which then get weighted according to the percentage weightings. And so, and then it pushes it back at me and says, well, this is your ranking, but there might be like 8 proposals that all got the same score, and then I have to rank within that category. And it's like, oh God, I've got to go back and read those proposals again and try and decide, you know, they were all great, which one's greatest. You know, it's hard. Okay. So, message here is when you read your assessors' reports, know that that's the advice they were given. Those are the words they choose to use. You can kind of infer your scores. So the ARC assessors, the ARC is an official ARC slide. They encourage every active researcher to become an assessor. If you're not currently on their list or you don't receive invitations, you can get on the list. You can send an email. And in fact, just recently, universities were contacted to nominate people to refresh the database. And it would be great to not only have more people in the database, but more descriptive write-ups of what your research expertise is, like descriptions that can actually help us. Like, it's not too much detail to say what kind of mathematical techniques you use. Don't keep it vague and just say maths. This is an ARC slide as well. How do I provide good detailed assessment? So the advice is objective comments, always. Detailed comments, just don't give a couple of sentences. Give sufficient information for the applicants to provide a rejoinder. Don't just say this is flawed, you have to say why so that people can actually come up with a counter-example or whatever. The scores should match the comments, so don't be really glowing and then give it a low mark, or vice versa. And even if you're not an assessor, this is important for you as an applicant to know that this is what the assessors are expected to do, because if you have an assessment report that you feel doesn't meet these requirements, then again, we'll see it as well, but alert us to the fact in your rejoinder that maybe the comments were not particularly objective or helpful, or, you know, you can't see that they might say glowing things and give you a low score. You can't see that, but we're on the lookout for that. One of the first things we do is look for mismatch between the comments and the scores.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
The ARC doesn't give any feedback to the assessors about how, I mean, even just how well they assess.
No.
Is it possible for them to do that? Because sometimes we don't know, you know, whether kind of information we're giving is coverage or too little, or...
I think there have been some cases where the panel commented on an assessor needing to be spoken to, and the chair undertook to do that. And I myself have had a word with a colleague who was given lots of proposals to assess, and they were not particularly helpful reports because, for mathematicians sometimes, when they're looking at a proposal that's in applied maths, sometimes there's a tendency for people to say, well, I can see how this advances biology, but where's the mathematical interest? How's this innovative in maths? And therefore I give it low scores. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You're not just reviewing whether this is advancing maths, you're looking at whether this is advancing science. And if this is, you know, out there as an example of an applied maths project, you know, if you're just looking at it only from one perspective, you're not providing a very helpful report. Thanks, we got the message that it's not mathematically interesting, but is it mathematically correct? And, you know, there's much more that could have been said there. So I had to give some feedback to someone who I know personally. But yeah, so I think in exceptional cases, people do undertake to have a word. But no, there's no en masse feedback about this is a list of great assessors, you did a great job, like some journals do for good referees. There's no awards for for great. I think we should actually have awards.
I think we should, like, just even, you know, if you're committing time to assessing, then it would be good to learn how to do it better.
Yeah.
And there's no documentation really much on
what's
it just
expected.
Gets sent to you.
Yeah.
And when you do it for the first time, you have no idea what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, and you don't even know really how many words you should write for each box.
Well,
it's this kind of stuff.
Maybe that should be sent with you at the same time, or to be made more obvious.
Give you a link in the email.
You should have it in front of you as your assessor.
Yeah, there's the Assessor Handbook, and the Assessor Handbook has this in there, and it also has some words about please provide objective comments, please back up your comments to match the scores, that kind of thing. But, you know, I mean, when I've been a detailed assessor as well, I've sometimes felt that I don't have a lot to say for a certain criteria. And you think, oh, is 2 sentences enough? I don't know. I'm saying positive things. I'm giving a high score. Maybe that's okay. If I was criticising, I feel I have to write more. Yeah. Okay. So, what happens after the reviews are returned? So, first of all, 3 months earlier, Carriage 1 assigns up to 8 assessors, knowing that probably half of them are going to say no, and we hope to have 4 that stick. So every proposal should ideally have 4, but minimum of 2 detailed assessors. And so as soon as that's done, so you spent a week with the word cloud, frustration, assigning detailed assessors, you're done with that, and now you think, great, I've got 3 months now to read those very carefully. Some of them I've already opened up because I had to figure out what kind of maths they're talking about, but now I have to actually read them and I have to take notes. And so for me, it took around 45 minutes per proposal to read through the proposal and take my notes. It's just a first pass. The good ones that are in the funding range, I'll come back to again. But first pass, 45 minutes per proposal, take notes. I think coming up I'll show you my little note template, and try to score according to the required distribution, which is really hard, as I've already mentioned. So you take 3 months to read everything, budgeting a certain amount of time each week. If you're doing it properly, I guess some people leave it to the end, but that would be crazy. And then we get, so we've read it, already formed our opinion, regardless of what the assessors have said. Haven't seen that yet. Got my own opinion, taken my own notes, got my own scores. Then I get the assessor reports. I get the rejoinder at the same time, the scores, and it's an opportunity for me to change my scores before I upload the rankings. So carriage 1 and 2 usually are not in the same city, but there might be Skype calls and various things. I was lucky that I had, for the ones that I was carriage 1 or carriage 2, the other carriage for probably half my proposals was also in Melbourne, so we actually got together for 2 days before we had to upload the results, just to save arguing in Canberra. We'd argue in Melbourne first, and so we kind of reached some consensus about some things, and a lot of the conversations are really around looking for assessors whose scores don't match their comments, looking for assessors that might have a bias, misunderstood something, looking for assessors that raise points that the rejoinder didn't satisfactorily address, so there's a question mark over that proposal now. And so, yeah, just absorbing all of that. And because maybe I missed some of these issues when I read it the first time with 45 minutes, and of course the detailed assessors are supposed to be experts in the field, so you consider their opinion and update your scores.
Do you always read the rejoinder?
Yes. Yes. Maybe sometimes just very quickly if there actually wasn't anything raised. But first I read the assessor reports and the scores, and I say, oh, Assessor D had a big question mark. Obviously they've really upset about something to do with the methodology. Read what they said about the methodology, then look at the rejoinder to see whether or not it's addressed. And if they didn't even mention it, or they gave some vague thing, then there's still a question mark over the methodology. See what the other carriage thinks about that. So we finally upload the rankings, and I may or may not have hit the targets for the 10% whatever. The ARC will massage that, do my best. And wait 2 weeks, have a holiday at that point because you really need it, while the ARC finalises all the rankings from everything. And just a few days before we go to Canberra, they send you, you can now log onto the system and see all the proposals ranked with the clearly in, the uncertainty band and the probably not. Right, so they've actually worked out with the success rates that they expect and the budget that's available, they've gone through and kind of banded in that way. So at that point, you have a few days before you're heading off to Canberra to refamiliarise yourself with the ones that are likely to be funded, and definitely the ones that are in the uncertainty range, because that's what we're going to be discussing in Canberra. That's not to say that the ones below are not going to be discussed. In fact, the first thing that happens in Canberra is that we talk about rescuing proposals. Are there any proposals below the uncertainty band that anyone wants to rescue? And so the first hour of the meeting in Canberra, everyone rescues almost everything. Everyone's got their, oh, well, I really like this one. I don't know why it's down so low. Everyone throws all these proposals up to rescue, and then the chair, after a while, just lets it happen. And then after a while, the chair says, okay, so at this rate, we're going to be here for 3 weeks. Would anyone like to reconsider? Because, you know, these were proposals that were ranked low for a reason, and unless you as carriage 1 ranked it really, really high, I'm not talking about middle, but really, really high, probably it's not going to be an A or a B. And so then slowly they kind of go back. Pascal?
How are the rankings weighted?
I'll show you that in a minute. You mean the balance between the detailed and the general? Yeah, we'll get to that. And so that's already been done, and I'll show you the formula in a minute. Yep.
Did you change a lot of your scores after let's say, the expert review or the detailed reviewers?
Yeah, I changed a lot of my scores. Primarily because a lot of my scores were sitting on C, really. Like, it's all good. You know, you read it and you think, I'm convinced, it's good. I wasn't necessarily super excited about it. But yeah, in many cases, my C turned into a B or an A just because there was such enthusiasm from the detailed assessors. And in other cases, my C, I didn't see a flaw that other people saw. And so it's like, great, you've given me a reason, a reason to move that one down. So, yeah. Okay, so then 1 week before Canberra, you have to reread all the proposals that you're Carriage 1 and Carriage 2 for, because you're going to be discussing them and you have to sound knowledgeable, that are either in the funding range or the uncertainty band. And if you're Carriage 1, you have to prepare a budget recommendation as well, assuming it's going to get funded. What do you recommend funding for? And assuming a 70% funding level. So people are not going to get everything they've asked for. So what would you cut? Okay, so here's an example. This is an ARC slide. Here's an example. You can't read it, but it's not relevant to, in fact, it's made up. From Frankston University of Technology, the Springvale Matrix, the social potential of hyperlocal journalism and community media, from Gretchen Sunshine. And what we have here, this is what we see on our laptops in the room and projected onto the wall. We have 2 general assessors and 2 detailed assessors. So I know you can't read it, so let me tell you that the 2 general assessors, who are the college members, have given it a C. 1 detailed assessor has given it a B and 1 has given it an A. So the bottom one, straight A's. Professor Big Ears loved it. Straight A's for all the criteria, therefore A overall, and they ranked it 2 out of the 5 that they reviewed. Okay, so they looked at 5, they ranked this second with straight A's. So obviously their first one was straight A's as well. If they may have given all straight A's, who knows. But at this point, they love it, but it's not the best one that they saw. The other detailed assessor, Professor Noddy, ranked it 4 out of 9. Oh, okay, that's better. 4 out of 9, and landed on a B with an A for the researchers, track record, a B for the quality of the project, a B for feasibility, and B for research. ResInv, I don't know what that is. Innovation? Okay, yeah. Anyway, got a B overall, but it was ranked 4 out of 9. Okay, so if you're only looking at 9 proposals and you're trying to get a sort of bell curvy thing happening, you know, it's probably not going to stay at the top end. And then the 2 college members already saw that. Don't know what they originally thought of the proposal, but they've looked at this, they've read the assessor reports and the rejoinder, and they've settled on calling it a C. This one had 80 proposals and ranked at 26, and this one had 103 and ranked at 46. So it's outside the funding range for both of those panel members. Those panel members will not be arguing that this is worthy of funding, despite the fact that there's 1 assessor that gave it straight A's. It just wasn't up in the top 18% of proposals that they saw.
Are these already the normalised Cs, or are these
Yes, they're normalised Cs. So they've already been normalised. So, you know, look at this, straight Bs, and yet the overall is C, right? It's normalised already. And sometimes you're surprised to see what the score is. It's like, no, but I liked it. Why has it gone to C? Because I liked too many. Yeah. So the final score then that that the proposal gets is, so you average the college scores and you average the detailed assessors, and it's the average of the averages. That's how they work out the final ranking. Okay.
Do you get to see the other rankings for the assessors? Like, so for example, if I had 5 papers to review, or 5 applications to review, do you get to see if I rank them all A's or like on a...
No, because I might have conflict of interest with some of the ones that you're looking at, so I don't think I'd have complete information.
Yeah, no, it was more just about the sets of ranks, and you wouldn't even need to know the actual applicants. It's just like, do I rank everything as an A super enthusiastically?
I don't know if I saw that.
Or do I rank, between A and
I don't think I ever saw the whole distribution of an assessor, but you can infer a lot from examples you see. Like if somebody ranked it, 6 out of 8 and it was straight A's, I'm going to infer that they give everyone straight A's. Yeah. Okay, so that's the score that we see that goes into the ranking list that determines whether you're in or uncertain or unlikely. Okay, so then we get to Canberra. So I've already refreshed my memory about the ones that I'm pretty sure are going to be discussed. And that I'm glad that I took my notes because I don't have to read through the whole proposal again because I might have read it 3 months ago. I've got my summary. And on there I've also added, beyond my initial impressions, I've added standout comments from the reviewers and the rejoinder. Okay, so then you're in Canberra. And there's this big thing about conflict of interest and you are constantly leaving the room, and they arrange the seats so it's in a horseshoe and the doors at the back, and they arrange the seats based on who has the most conflict of interest. So it seems I had the most. I was sitting right in the doorway and constantly having to leave the room. And when you have to leave the room, all you know is your name flashes on the screen and you have to quickly get out. And no drama, just quickly leave the room, and then there's a little waiting area outside. The door's automatically shut, it's cone of silence, and you don't know how long you're going to be out there for. All you know is that when you come back in, you're going to be probably carriage 1 on something, and so you're looking desperately, trying to go through and think about what is the next one that I might have to say something about. And you're out there in the corridor, and you're thinking, okay, this was a proposal that I liked. I've got to convince everyone in the room that it's really good. What do I say? And I might have like 2 minutes to pitch what's so great about this proposal. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that more. But anyway, so you're out of the room if your name appears on the screen. There's an online anonymous voting system. So there'll be proposals will be discussed, and it will be, okay, who wants to see this one funded, or who wants to rescue this one? It's currently not going to be considered. Who would like to discuss this one again? Online voting system. Yep.
At the beginning you mentioned 3 types of conflict of interest. Can you just give me an example what an institutional conflict of interest is?
If you just work at the same institution as any of the investigators on the proposal. So even though you don't know them, you're not allowed to assess or be a college member or even be in the room when it is being discussed, anyone from your institution. So as I said, Monash, Melbourne, I had chemistry at Melbourne. I hadn't even arrived at Melbourne yet. I was in the process of negotiating employment, and I was conflicted with any application from Melbourne, even if I didn't know the people. Okay, so the process, with that in the background, that there's conflict of interest, you have to leave the room, and there's online anonymous voting. The process is, first thing, who wants to rescue proposals that are below the uncertainty band? And everyone throws them up, and then we think more carefully and get rid of some of them again, but you're still left with a bunch that there's some merit to them, and we want to discuss it. So they just get added into the bottom of the uncertainty band. And that might be because we feel that the scores are too low and it's unfair that they're so low. You're surprised to see it so low. And you know why it's so low, because you can see clearly that there's an assessor there that ruined it for everybody. Everyone else loves it and one assessor hates it and it's pulled it down and it's unfair. Let's talk about it. So lots of reasons why things get rescued. Okay, and then we leave alone the ones that are clearly at the top and we start discussing the uncertainty band. So starting at the top of the uncertainty band, so these are the stronger proposals, we go through proposal by proposal. Carriage 1 has 2 minutes to give a pitch that summarises what the proposal is about, what the team's like, an analysis of the assessor reports and the rejoinder and whether the scores match the comments, whether they feel that there's a problem there. And then everybody votes. Anonymously, everyone votes on whether or not we want to shortlist. Shortlist is the word. So if there's a majority that agrees to shortlist, then we keep that one. It was uncertain and now it's on the short list of ones to be considered. And if it doesn't attract enough votes, it's gone at that moment. So based on the number of votes, well, sorry, I shouldn't say it's gone. It'll be at the very bottom of the uncertainty band and we'll run out of money. Right? So based on the number of votes, the uncertainty band gets updated throughout the days. Okay, so you still have the clearly in, but the uncertainty band has been reshuffled after everyone's had a chance to hear about the proposal and vote on it, and then based on the number of votes, it determines its position within the uncertainty band, or within the shortlist. Okay, and so that once that's all done, you've gone through the uncertainty band, including the rescued ones, and everyone's had a chance to vote, and you can see which ones are the most compelling and which ones are less convincing. Then we start from the very top, and we go through. And again, carriage 1, 2-minute pitch, summarising to the room what's so great about this proposal. And it's easy at the beginning because they're all fantastic. They're way at the top. You have assessor reports, 5, 6 assessors, straight A's. It's all easy and great. And so it's a 2-minute pitch, votes, everyone says yes, of course, and then a budget recommendation if the decision was yes. And so very quickly, look, we'll give them 70%. They asked for teaching relief, we're not going to give them that. And they asked for a PhD scholarship. They're at a good university that should have scholarships. Let's say no to the scholarship. Done. Okay, next one. There are times when the proposal was clearly in, but the discussion and the subsequent questions that were raised enough concerns that when we came to vote, there was some doubt in people's minds, and then maybe that proposal goes back into the uncertainty band, right? So some things can go wrong in the discussion, and maybe that's just because someone who wasn't carriage 1 or carriage 2 has something to contribute. There've been cases where someone noticed some plagiarism, for instance, that wasn't detected before by anybody else, and things like that. So this continues until all the shortlisted proposals have been discussed and voted on. The budget is tracked. The ARC staff are right there tracking how the money's going. And then when the money runs out, a line is drawn, and then there's a reserve list. And then we're done. Recommendations go to the minister, and 3 months later, we get the email.
So does each panel have a stack of money?
Yes. Each panel starts out the week with a budget. Panels don't like to share their money between the others. Occasionally, with cross-disciplinary proposals, occasionally you have carriage 1 and carriage 2 who are in different rooms, and then you have to quickly get that person to come in. And I had to go into biology at one point because there was a proposal that was allocated to biology, even though it really had very little to do with biology. It was really probability. But I think they had used a bit of a throwaway line and future applications in biology, but there was nothing in the proposal about it. It certainly wasn't a mathematical biology one, and it somehow landed over there. And so they asked me at lunchtime to quickly read through the proposal and come in and do the 2-minute pitch about what was great about it, which was easy. And it was like, yay, another maths one. So I convinced them that they should fund it. And then there was like, well, whose budget should that come out of? But it came out of theirs. So...
And can I ask another question?
Yes.
Is there a reason why the ALC doesn't, or the College of Expert doesn't mention which budget items are being cut?
I think there's an attitude that it's up to you. You're just given a single line item and you know best what you need to manage the project and achieve the outcomes. There have been times where I thought we should actually say what we cut was teaching relief. And in fact, I think that used to be the case. I remember years ago getting awarded a DP, and the letter said the money is not to be used for teaching relief. But I think they got rid of that, and now it's just a single line item. People do what they want to do anyway, right? So.
Okay, you mentioned that you have to have a talk with an assessor about assessing the whole of the proposal instead of just the math. And then now you mentioned someone having to go into another room. Do you feel like when you get these interdisciplinary proposals that they're sort of at a disadvantage because it sounds like there's sort of silos of assessors?
Yeah, well, I think when you're assigning 8 assessors, I think if you're doing a good job, you're trying to get a really broad perspective on the proposal, and if it's interdisciplinary, you need to make sure you're not getting 8 identical clones looking at it, but you are getting that. And then I think it's our responsibility to listen to those different voices and try to make a decision that's best for advancing science in general, and I think that's what happens in the room.
It really comes down to your one person and
yeah.
giving a 2-minute pitch, and if
that's
they're
right.
not excited about interdisciplinary,
yeah.
then that's it.
That's right, and that's, I guess, one of my main messages. That's one of my main messages when I'm giving this talk for our community, is it's really important that we nominate people well to be on the College of Experts. So Jessica asked the question, what aspects of the proposal received the most attention? I should have had this earlier. This is my little template that I use when I'm lying on the couch reading a proposal in 45 minutes.
Yeah, so press the screen again. Double tap.
Good. Can I move it? Yeah. All right. So all the proposals last year started with 18010 something, 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 something. So I just save myself some time and write in the last 4 digits. And this is where I'm going to pencil in my scores for the criteria. Pencil, because I know they will change. And this is where I scribbled my notes on the investigator or the team, project quality, feasibility, benefits. I've got a space down here for later on when the detailed assessor reports become available, take a few notes about pertinent comments that people made, and some notes to myself about how I justify changing my scores, what influenced me. And so this is the little one-pager that I have with me when I'm out in the corridor in Canberra, and I'm trying to refresh my memory about the proposal. So when I say comments on project quality and innovation, I want to be writing sentences there that I can say again about what's really exciting about this proposal. It's not much space. I don't have much space, I don't have much time to pitch. So, you know, I'm not rewriting the whole first page of the proposal. It's really got to be the sentence. So what do we discuss? So track record and strong assessor reports are obviously going to help a lot, because even if the carriages don't really follow it, you're going to be influenced by a great track record, you know, impressive things that people are doing, and assessors that support that this person's great. It's even better though if I can actually understand it. So if I can understand the importance and I can communicate the importance of what it is to a room full of people. And if I don't really understand it, if I just have to go in there and say, look, these assessors are really great and they loved it, but if I can't communicate what's great about it, then it's probably not as compelling as another one that I can, you know. And maybe that's a limitation of me, and there's only so much of maths I understand. But if I read the proposal for 45 minutes and I still couldn't quite grasp what was exciting about it, I think it's in trouble. The whole track record being great and trust me, I'm brilliant, only goes so far. Right? I cannot go into a room full of people and say this person's brilliant and I didn't really follow what they wanted to do, but let's give them some money anyway. It's not going to fly. It's a bit of a myth. Maybe this is just a Monash myth, I'm not sure, but certainly people at Monash seem to believe, because someone did some analysis of past successes and came up with a theory that you need to have a senior CI on the proposal. I didn't see that. I saw plenty of proposals where, relative to opportunity, a team of young stars were going in on their own with no senior CI, and they got funded because they're a young, exciting, dynamic team and with a great, exciting proposal. I saw plenty of proposals, not plenty, some proposals where there were a couple of young CIs and they'd brought in the older, close to retirement CI with loads of track record, and it didn't look like that person was really going to be doing that much, had not actually collaborated that much with these people. It looked pretty obvious what was happening, and in some sense in your mind you just kind of throw them out. Right? I don't actually believe that they're going to be making a contribution to the project. I'm assessing the feasibility of the project on the basis of the people who are actually going to be doing the work. So I wouldn't, I think it's a myth that you need to add a senior CI. It's really just about making the most compelling case that the team is the right group of people. Now, if you feel that the team needs the leadership and the experience of someone older as a mentor, that's great to mention that they're around, and but they don't have to be a CI unless they're actually going to be contributing to the project.
But did you ever see a more junior team who didn't have a track record with the ARC get a grant funded more senior?
Yes. Yes.
Was there discussion around that?
Yeah, the discussion was around the fact that one of the assessors is somebody who everyone has a lot of respect for, had basically written in his assessor report, this is a very exciting young team, and if the ARC doesn't fund work like this, I don't know what we're here for. And that was all I needed to say. I completely agree with them. This is a young, dynamic group of people who have come to Australia from around the world in the last couple of years, and they had quickly formed a really exciting new research area that involved building bridges between a few things, and it was exciting, and they don't need a senior CI. This is a group of young people who have formed a connection, and let's support them to do it. So, so we're looking for consensus in what the assessors think, or good rejoinders that confirm suspicion of bias. If we think that there's some bias but you don't say anything, or we think that an assessor has a view that's a bit different, because you can see all the assessors' comments as well. You can see if someone's a standout and like an outlier. If you don't draw attention to that, then we think that maybe, we don't want to read too much into it. So you have to tell us how you feel about the assessor comments as well, without getting emotional. Right? Be objective. Okay, so what makes a compelling proposal? The most important thing, a 2-minute pitch that I can understand, that I can find easily again when I'm out in the corridor being stressed, that I can really believe in, because, my acting skills can only go so far. Right? I've really got to, put my hand on my heart and believe that this is exciting. And that I can convince a room full of non-mathematicians that it's more important than the work that they want their colleagues to be funded for. I think a compelling proposal gives a really good balance between having a track record on the topic. So you've got the runs on the board, you are the person to do this work, versus you already know so well how to do this work that you just need a research assistant to do it for you. Right? You've got all the answers. There's no research left to do. You've already figured it out. You just need to implement it now. Right? So you've got to convince that you've got enough of a track record, but not that it's already a completed piece of work, that there's still some interesting research to go on, that you don't already know how to do it all. Does that make sense, that one? Yeah. Because sometimes the proposals can look so well considered and completed that you're wondering what they need the money for, apart from to hire a research assistant to do a little bit of stuff. It doesn't look like research anymore. It looks like most of the big research questions have actually been thought through, and it's just implementation. So striking that balance. What things hurt proposals? So having a really vague 100-word project summary and keywords and things that give the word cloud nothing to work with, and not an informative word cloud. So you end up getting generic assessors. People who say that they do mathematical modelling and you do mathematical modelling, but you're completely different paradigms. Having a first page that doesn't help me find that 2-minute pitch quickly enough. Because we all read the first page. It's not just the carriage one out in the corridor trying to figure out what to say. The detailed assessors also, that first page is important. Inflated budgets, we're all a bit sceptical about people that ask for way, way too much. It doesn't so much happen in maths and stats, but in some of the other fields, some of the budgets were ridiculous, which just puts you in a bad mood, really, when someone's asking for ridiculous things. So it probably doesn't really hurt the proposal too much. If the research is worthy, it'll just be slashed more if you don't believe it's all needed. But tell you what, when someone asks for a modest budget, we all love you. It's like they're hardly asking for anything. What they're asking for is exactly what they need. We love that. And you're going to get funded more like 90%. So a lot of the maths ones are already super lean. You're just asking for a postdoc and a bit of travel, and you're pretty much going to get that. So the 70% is on average. Many of the maths ones, they're funded more like 90%. And a lot of the chemistry ones are slashed. And there's a lot of discussion about whether they can still do the work if you slash the budget that much, but I'm pretty sure they can.
Question. All the people around the table when you're voting have access to the full application as well?
Yep. Yes.
So they would all read at least the first page of the applications as well?
You'd like to think they have, but if they haven't, then your 2-minute pitch kind of summarises, and while you're doing your 2-minute pitch, they're kind of flicking through, and sometimes they're just looking for something that they can maybe raise as a question. And many times there were proposals where you think, why wasn't I carriage 1 or carriage 2 on that proposal? That's actually in my area, so I've already read it because I'm interested. And yeah.
Sorry, what's shown on the screen when you discuss proposals? The first page?
We all have our own laptops and the whole proposal to scroll through. Usually what's on the screen when we're discussing a proposal are the assessor reports, or that summary that had the assessor, each line showing the scores and the overall score, and the person driving the machine can go anywhere. We can see more detail about the assessor's reports or whatever. But we can all see that as well. Yeah. So many times when someone's giving the 2-minute pitch, they might fail to mention something. They're trying to maybe give a positive spin on something, and meanwhile everyone else in the room is clicking on the assessor reports trying to find a negative comment and to see whether or not the rejoinder addressed it, and then to say, well, I noticed you didn't mention that Assessor D really questioned the feasibility of the project because whatever. And so the person pitching has to either say why that isn't a problem or agree that, yeah. So people around the room are often, while you're pitching, trying to find things to shoot down. It's fun. Okay, so tips to improve chances. So here's my number 1 tip. Your first page, we often get a lot of people asking us to read proposals, right? So colleagues, you're always asked, can you read my proposal? When you ask someone to read your proposal, don't just look for their written comments and, I put a comma here, or I think you should move these 2 paragraphs around, that kind of comment. The most important thing they can tell you is whether or not they can tell you back again what your proposal's about. So don't just send them the proposal and ask for suggestions about how to improve it. The big question is, what's my proposal about? Can you, in 2 minutes, tell me what my proposal's about and why is it exciting? Because if they can't do that, then you've failed to give them that first page that enables anybody to tell you again, tell back to you what's exciting. So I encourage you to change the way you get feedback from people. It's not feedback about the words necessarily, but have they got the idea? And it's quite a different skill. Sometimes I can go through a colleague's proposal and I can say, oh yeah, that's a good first page now, and send it back. But if 5 minutes later, if they came back to me and said, what was my proposal about again? Maybe I can't actually say what it was about. And it's a different skill, right? Proofreading and saying, did that make sense, that argument to here, to here, to here? Did I get it? Versus, did I remember it? Did I love it? Am I excited about it? So practice on people and then see if they can summarise what your proposal's about. I feel that last bit we often miss. 100-word summary that really helps. Now you know about how the detailed assessors are assigned. Try to think about who you want to be reviewing your work and how your choice, what your word cloud could look like if you set it up the right way. Avoid vague terms like mathematical modelling. What methods, stochastic calculus, fractional PDEs, dynamic systems, whatever. Try to be a little more specific. Don't have freeloaders on your proposal, including senior people, genuine contributions from every team member, and realistic plans for budget. And my final piece of advice would be give seminars at universities, make yourself known, especially if you're new to Australia as well. I know a lot of young colleagues who are new here and aren't known around the country. These are the people who are going to be assessing your work. And I have seen some people that have attitudes of like, if this person's so great, how come I haven't heard of them? This person's been in the country for 3 years and I still haven't heard of them. I don't see them at conferences. They've never come to my university to give a seminar. That attitude does kind of exist, and bias is inevitable as much as we try to avoid it. So try to influence the bias that people have about you in a positive direction. When they hear your name or they read what you're doing, they should think, yeah, I think that person's doing some exciting work. What can you do to get a positive bias in people's minds? Yeah, that's the advice I've got.
Can I ask another question? I mean, we've got no freeloaders in the proposal, including senior people. But the other thing I wanted to ask too is that each member of the team is evaluated with respect to the quality of that person. Yeah? And so I guess there's another thing there. So it's relative to opportunity. So you could have somebody there who doesn't have a great track record.
Yes.
Then you'd have to really argue hard about why they're part of the team. Because otherwise, sometimes an assessor will say, this is a great team except for the person, one person, and therefore I have to give it a B rather than an A. That kind of thing. Is that what happens in the room, or is it not as subtle as that?
I think if you had an outlier assessor who gave the team a score that was different from everybody else, you'd look carefully at that, and then you'd look for words that they were using that might suggest that they hadn't considered relative to opportunity. Personally, when I'm scoring the team, I'm not so bothered by weak links in there. I can sometimes see that maybe someone was added. There's many different reasons why people form teams, and sometimes people are added because a senior person who's actually doing the work wants to bring along a junior colleague. I see it for what it is, it's fine. I don't make the score less because they've added someone with less experience. You see it as a good mentoring thing. Sometimes you add somebody because they've got the track record, but you don't actually believe that person's actually going to have much to do with the project, and I don't give it a lower score because of that. I'm really just assessing the people who I think are going to do the work. So maybe that's just me. But in the end, it's one of the main things that the panel is keen to discuss, given that the research itself is meritorious. Is there anything we need to discuss about what's been said about the people and the team, and is there bias and things in the assessor reports? Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
So a question on a similar theme. So for, say, younger people, maybe, if even given relative to opportunity, if their track record is not so great, then, let's say, not sufficiently strong to win a discovery on their own. So this is a bit different to what you're talking about. What would be your advice to these people?
Yeah, I'm not sure, apart from to go in with more experienced people, but actually making a good contribution. In my experience, from what I've seen, in most cases, actually, that person is making a big contribution. In fact, they've probably written the grant, and they're at that point where they're trying to transition from being the constant postdoc funded by someone's grant that they actually helped to write, but they can't be named on it because it's funding their salary. So you're in that awkward situation. And then at some point, they cross that divide and get named as a CI, knowing that they can't be funded by the grant. But in my experience, most of the time, they're quite critical to the work. It's been built around their previous postdoc work and all that kind of stuff. So you believe that they should be part of the team. I think many times we see situations where we believe there should be people who are part of the team who are not, because of the funding situation.
But you're saying no hangers-on, so if a young person is coming up with the idea,
they're not a hanger-on.
Strong idea, they want to go ahead with the project. Without including a more senior person, you might be able to see that it's probably not going to get funded because of, as you just explained, the way the process works.
No, so what I said was, if I see a senior hanger-on,
Yes.
I don't give a reduced score for that. I just see it for what it is, but I wouldn't. It's and that. I guess what I'm saying is I don't boost the score because of that senior person, but it's really about that person and where they're at in their career right now. And if the ideas are theirs and they're critical, and you feel excited about the work they want to do, they're going to get a good score relative to opportunity, regardless of senior, bigwig, and Now, some detailed assessors may give it a higher score because of that person, but maybe it's just me. I personally don't feel compelled to do that. But I think it's a true application of the idea of relative to opportunity. You've got to acknowledge that there's many applicants who are at that point where they're transitioning from being a postdoc funded by other people's grants to applying now for themselves. Relative to the opportunity that they've had, how do they compare to others? Yeah.
So what do you mean by relative to opportunity?
Years since PhD, opportunities that you've had for full-time work versus part-time, career interruptions, all that kind of stuff. And the nature of the work you've been doing full-time, so if you had heavy teaching loads, that kind of thing. You know, just thinking about actually how much research time has this person had, how much opportunity and support have they had to develop their independent research ideas, and relative to where they are, you're kind of comparing in your mind a population of people at different stages of careers. And so relative to opportunity just means comparing to people who are in that sort of, let's say, up to 5 years. Well, you know, I mean, when you're looking at the DECRA applications, it's much more homogeneous in the relative to opportunity. They're all pretty much, I mean, you've got some who have already done a couple of postdocs versus someone who's on their first, and it's quite different, different there. But for DP, it's it's just relative to the opportunities they've had to develop their own research, and don't compare people to others that have had different opportunities. Yeah. Any more questions? No?
I guess it's not a question, but Tony, you've been on the College of Assessors as well, College of Experts, I should say. Just wondered if you had any other tips and tricks for us as well.
Not really, except the rejoinder is very important because I think a lot of the decisions are actually made on the assessor reports and the rejoinder. So
Yeah.
you know, it's as if the original application has sort of drifted downstream, and you're making decisions based on those on the assessor reports. There's several of them. There's going to be 4 or 6. So it's a wide assessment of the project.
Yeah.
And, so that's what's important, especially the rejoinder. If the assessor reports do have some criticism in them.
Yeah, I think if there's criticism, then your rejoinder has to address it in a convincing way, or it's dead. I wish I had advice for the majority of people who are in a different situation, and the situation is there's no criticism. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just not being called exciting enough, or, you know, it's fine. and the assessor reports say it's fine, and you're doing good work, you're proposing good work, you've got a good track record, everything's good and fine. The rejoinder then, what can you say? Thanks. Thanks for your positive comments. I wish I had some advice for people about anything they could say in the rejoinder that would suddenly elevate it to being more exciting. Don't forget, in the rejoinder is an opportunity to update us with anything more exciting that's happened recently that you didn't know many, many months earlier. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, that's the vast majority of proposals are in that situation where there's actually no major criticism of what you're doing. It's all good.
Can you rejoinder say thanks, and also like then explain a bit more about the exciting, like if they haven't got the A and B type things in there?
Yeah, you certainly shouldn't just say thanks. No. You've got 750 words or whatever, use it. Get opportunity to...
Can you talk up the exciting bits even though that
Yes, yes. You know. What I don't like, so certainly if there's no criticism, do that. Fill the space with reinforcing. What I don't like is when there has been criticism and the rejoinder is just doing the reinforcing the positives and they don't address the negatives at all. And I'm searching through the rejoinder trying to find, but a concern was raised about whatever, and I can't find you mentioning it. I just see you being a little bit delusional about how positive the reports were and reinforcing how great everything is. It doesn't look like they took seriously the concerns. So.
I have a question too.
Well, my question
question. You talked a bit about excitement, but what were the axes of excitement? What were the words that we used to articulate that?
I don't know. It's
Not compelling.
yeah, and compelling's a bad word.
What were things that you came back to again and again when they were talking about exciting research? Like, were there any themes or anything else?
I think it's trying to create the impression, supported by assessors backing you up on it, that this is at the cutting edge of something. That it's not more of the same, that it's not incremental. Anything that looks incremental, it's hard to make it incremental look exciting. So trying to communicate where the cutting edge is, the work that you're doing is at that cutting edge, and the criticality of that work, that sense of urgency that it needs to be funded. That, creating a sense of urgency, I think, is an essential ingredient. And that can be done even for very theoretical pure maths things as well. It doesn't all have to be leading to cures for cancer and stuff. I've seen some really good pure maths ones that create a sense of urgency because now's the time for bringing together this field and this field talking together to make advances. And it doesn't have to be always, economic or social impact. But yeah, I think a sense of urgency and that you're at the cutting edge and that you're a dynamic team functioning well it's feasible that you're going to be able to do something.
How do you make it sort of cutting edge and feasible? Like you could say, like a cure cancer, but it's clearly not feasible.
Yeah.
So if it's incremental, then it's more feasible.
Yes. Yeah, and I have seen some proposals that did make I won't use the word compelling, a strongly compelling case for supporting something that was incremental. And the argument went along these lines. We've developed some techniques over the last 10 years, never been funded by the ARC at all. And these techniques are now getting to the point where we can really start to make an impact. We've been working in one application area and we've polished it, and now it's ready to have impact in other areas, but there are some challenges that we have to overcome. It sounds very incremental, but the excitement about the potential impact of that work and the fact that they'd done it on the basis of no ARC funding so far, and here's an opportunity to take taxpayer money and invest in something that's actually going to have an impact in something, I found to be a very compelling argument. And when I was doing the 2-minute pitch for that, that's when you're talking incremental, that's the one that leapt into my mind, because I think somebody else in the room questioned whether it was just incremental, is it just more of the same? And so I had to kind of defend the need sometimes for incremental work to be supported. When someone's been supporting it, the university had been supporting it to that point, and now's the time to push it to the next level. So incremental isn't necessarily a dirty word, but that was exciting because the increments had got to the point where it was on the edge of something. Sorry, it's hard when I'm speaking so vaguely to make any sense. Yeah. Sorry.
Do you use many foreign assessors, or are they predominantly in?
They're predominantly in Australia. There are foreign assessors in the database.
Is foreign in New Zealand, or?
No. No. I probably didn't assign as many international assessors as I could have tried, simply because I wasn't sure of how perfect a match they would be unless it was in my area and I knew who they were. But also I just had this kind of, no evidence for this feeling, but this kind of gut feel that they're less likely to say yes if I ask them to assess. I get invitations from all around the world to assess for various grant schemes that I don't always accept. And in the end, I want to assign assessors who are going to say yes, because the more assessor reports you have, the better quality decision you can make. And I don't want a situation where I think I'm done and then the ARC says, no, sorry, that proposal's missing enough assessors, try again. So yeah, most of the time, I'd say probably for most of the proposals, maybe 3/4 of the assessors that I assigned were Australian. I'd try 1 or 2 internationals for each proposal, maybe, but I'm not sure that too many of them accepted, apart from those that, some of them have sort of joint appointments or honorary appointments. They tend to say yes. Yes?
So given that you're in a room with chemists and physicists and mathematicians and you're kind of arguing for maths to get this piece of a pie or something of money.
Not officially.
Sure. If you read something, a proposal that was kind of making a big jump towards curing cancer, say, how much of your 2-minute pitch can really be about the fact that it might end in curing cancer, given that it's not in the medical room?
You mean how much would they believe it?
Not how much would they believe it, but how much would they actually value it?
Yeah. I think everyone in the room is aware that they're there for the ARC and they're there to advance knowledge. And as long as there's a strong case to be made that invest taxpayer money in this piece of work and there will be some outcomes for knowledge, then everyone's quite supportive of that. It's not a case of, yeah, I can see that would advance neuroscience, but I don't care about neuroscience. I think everyone cares about just good quality work being done. Yeah.
Is the medical rule also discussed by the panel?
That's already been taken care of by the ARC staff before we get there. Any eligibility issues have already been taken care of. So we just have to, sometimes you might be looking at a proposal and say, really, did this meet the requirements? But we just assess it as it is. Likewise, sometimes we feel that maybe somebody's not eligible for something, but we assess it as it is and then even award funding, and then the ARC will investigate later on if something's fallen through the cracks and someone's not actually eligible. And that's why we have the reserve list as well. Yep.
Is it the same for the budget? Because sometimes the system has some budget items that I believe should not be in there or are not allowed to be in there.
That's usually only, unless an assessor or someone raised the question, we probably wouldn't discuss that until if we decide if the work is worthy to be funded. And then when Carriage 1 is presenting the proposed budget, that's when we would point out that maybe some items were ineligible. So we go through the budget request line by line, and then Carriage 1 is asked to justify which items are in and out, what the total is, and then it just gets recorded as a single line item. So yeah, we would just throw out anything that was not eligible. And even if it's eligible, sometimes requests for computers and things like that are just seen as, well, no.
Some people request to travel outside of 50,000 K because they say it's field work. To go
Right.
to somebody else and do collaborative research.
Yeah.
Which I think is very...
Yeah. We also saw, for maths, whether you call it field work or you call it travel, different people do different things and it's all fine. It doesn't...
No, but travel has a maximum, but field work has no maximum.
Maybe that's why they do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It didn't come up for discussion. I'll look into it next time.
We need more camping conferences.
Yes. Any more? Yes?
So you mentioned that you send it out to 8 potential assessors and you're going to get some kind of proportion of those who actually accept it. Does it make much difference to the outcome of the application as to how many assessors accept it? Like, do you want less or more? Or?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You can think of examples where you had only 2 glowing assessors, and so you say, seems great. That person might have been unlucky if more people had said yes and someone had criticised it. Yeah. I don't know. But, 2 is enough to see consensus.